Hello, YouTube. My name is Alan, and it's that time once again. Let's talk metal. Today, we're going to talk about a collection that has been sold to one of the local used stores, and as such, I've picked up a few pieces from it. Uh, just a few things. I'm a sick little monkey, and you know it. But yeah, so this isn't necessarily a collection update, but just looking at what's in the collection itself. This is an odd time of year for me to be buying this kind of volume of stuff. Usually here in the late fall, when we get close to the holiday season, I usually kind of just go into sort of lockdown mode when it comes to buying music. Part of that, of course, is there's a lot of bills around this time of year, a lot of stuff to buy for the holidays. Another factor for me personally is that I hate ordering records through the mail during the holiday season. I've ordered, of course, a lot of records over the years. I've had very, very few instances of records getting lost or damaged. Most of the ones that have had problems, though, have happened during that time frame of like late November through the end of December. That's when, of course, there's a much higher volume of mail in the United States. And packages definitely are not handled as carefully as they should be, with just the increase in volume, things getting moved around and loaded extra full. I've had, yeah, multiple records that have been damaged, broken, packaged, just crushed flat. And it's almost always during this time of year. So usually, yeah, between Halloween and Thanksgiving, maybe I get one or two last orders squeezed in. But by the time we get to Thanksgiving, I'm done with mail order. If you have to order some stuff for Christmas presents, that's one thing. But in terms of ordering stuff for myself for the collection, I don't even look around very much during this kind of 6 week period, which is okay. It gives me a chance to catch up on stuff that I may have picked up earlier in the year and just go back, replay some of the classics, things like that. But in this case, somebody has dumped a large collection of mostly extreme metal stuff at one of the stores here in South Carolina. And this store specializes in a lot of different sort of, underground music types. So it's definitely the kind of thing they would have on the shelves anyway. But was still really surprised to go in there a couple of weeks ago and there's all these used CDs that definitely were not there a week or two before when I'd been through last time. And chatting with the guys behind the counter, like, yeah, somebody brought in this huge collection and we're just working our way through it, pricing stuff out as fast as we can. And they've had to kind of do it in a couple of waves. So I bought one pile of stuff and like, if you're interested in more, come back in about a week or so and we'll have another big pile out there. And so, yeah, this giant stack of CDs I'm about to go through, it's built up over 2 or 3 trips back to the same store here over the past couple of weeks as they've been slowly getting everything out onto the shelf. And most of it has been CD. They've had a little bit of vinyl stuff come in too. I've only picked up one vinyl item, so I guess we'll start with that. And then we'll look through what CDs I've picked up. Something I'll mention too, though, before I show the first one, a lot of these are blind buys for me. They're bands that I've heard of, maybe people have recommended, but I've never really checked out. And there's not really much of a better time to check something out than when you find it at a local store and it's used for only a few bucks. That's the time I'm willing to take a chance on it. I'm not going to blind buy these things for $18.99 a piece off of some eBay or Discogs site. But when they're 7 or 8 bucks and it's a local store that I buy from regularly and helps those guys out a little bit, then sure, we'll take a chance on some of these. Some of these may be great. Some of these may be awful. Some of these bands may be slightly sketch, and I'm not fully aware of it. Also a possibility because we're dealing with a lot more black and death stuff. Just as sort of an examples for stuff. They've had some of the bigger named black metal bands, titles with Immortal, Mayhem, and such. They've had a ton of Season of Mist titles in the collection that's been brought in. They've had a ton of stuff that was released with the blackmetal.com logo on the black of it. So lots of those kind of titles gives you at least an idea of what's been coming in. But without further ado, let's go through these. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on them. There's about 20 titles, so I'm pushing about 24 things I've picked up. So it add up. Only vinyl piece that I found that I wanted was a Krieg album. Krieg's one of those bands I've heard about for decades, just never really got around to listening to much of their stuff. But Matt over at The Dark Path has talked about them pretty favorably over time. So, there's a Krieg album sitting there used for 18 bucks. Okay, sure, let's give it a chance. So it turns out this one is a set of recordings they did in the late 90s, but didn't get actually released until like the mid 2000s. I think this came out around 2005 or so. Discog says this one is supposed to be like a limited pressing of 1,000 that were hand numbered. I do not see a number anywhere on this, so I'm not sure if it's one that got overlooked, if there was an additional pressing not listed on Discogs that wasn't numbered. I'm not sure. I've only played it once, so don't really have much to say about it at this point. But yep, I finally do have a Krieg item on the shelf. All right, now to the CDs. A band that Mike Seatown recommended when he did a black metal episode of Heavy Metallurgy with me and Marty quite a while back was Alcest. And this was another one I've heard the name for years, but never actually sat down and listened to them. So something showed up. It was like, absolutely, this will be the time to take a chance. And most of you probably knew it. I did not. They play, a very pretty style of, post black metal, a lot of shoegaze worked into it. It works quite well. I think they get a good balance of the, faster black metal parts with those more atmospheric shoegaze kind of elements. So got this one, Escales de Lune. Have liked it quite a bit, played it a lot. Also got another one in the pile. This is the one that Mike Seatown had recommended. And you have to forgive me, these names are in French, and a lot of these are hard to read. Les Voyages de l'Âme. So I have not played this one yet. Don't know what it sounds like. I'll get to it when I get to it. They had a third Alcest CD, which I guess I should have picked up. When I went back the next time, it was already gone. That's one of those binds you get into in this situation. There's 3 Alcest CDs there. I've never heard a note by the band. Do you really buy all 3 at the same time? I don't know. Actually, they had 2 of them at first, and when I went back, they had this one. So I still got 2 of the 3. I always feel a little weird buying multiple albums by a band that's new to me, because if you don't like them, then you just bought multiple items that you don't like. And it always feels like going a little bit overboard. It's sometimes a little hard to fully process and digest the first album when you feel like you've got 2 more by the same band sitting here that you also need to get around to playing. So I'm trying to take my time with these, not go through them too fast and space them out a bit. But anyway, that's not going to be the only band that I've picked up multiple items by out of this collection. Next one, and this stack is in a pretty random order, Running Christ's The Heretics. Band that fell off my radio back around the A Dead Poem era. That album didn't impress me very much. It wasn't awful, but I didn't care for the direction they were going in. So I just haven't paid much attention to them since. This is pretty cool, though. This was another blind buy. Hadn't heard a note of it, but I remembered it getting pretty good press when it was released in 2019. And yeah, it's got kind of a weird, marching style, a little bit kind of a militant sound, lots of these big, choruses and stuff. Parts of it sound like a little bit of Samael and a early Samael and a little bit of Batushka, and it all gels and works pretty good. I've spun that one a lot and very happy with it. Next up, we have Druk, the Ukrainian band. This band, I've heard a couple of their early albums. When they came out, they made a bit of a splash. People were really interested in them. I never did find any albums. I'm pretty sure this is the first time I've ever seen a Druk album in a store in the live wild environment. And so I haven't kept up with them over the years. I remember when I heard those early ones, like, was it Blood in Our Wells, I think is one of them. They sounded good. I never sat down and gave them enough spins to really fully process the music. And I never got back around to them either. Druk's also a band that's, had some controversy around them at times over the years. At times you hear like, they're acting very sketchy. Other times you hear like, well, they've cleaned up their act and distanced themselves from that. I don't know what their current standing is. But, for $8, I'll take a chance on the album when it's sitting there in a used bin. And it wasn't by itself. There was another one. Again, some of these titles are like in, Ukrainian. This one has titles in both, I guess, Ukrainian and English. This one's a Furrow Cut Short. I've played this one a few times. It's a very straightforward black metal album. It doesn't have any of the acoustic or folksy elements that older stuff did. It's pretty good. Reminds me a little bit of Migwa. Folks are probably familiar with that band. So a couple of direct titles. I'll check them out. This one was another blind buy. I remembered the band's name from some review. It's called Ghost Bath. It was a weird name. The band was from North Dakota, which also struck me as being very odd. I don't know if I'd ever found a heavy metal band from North Dakota before. So this was another case, flipping through them. A lot of the titles they brought in, when you just look at the cover, there's not much to tell you what it is. So all of these I have to keep picking up and turning around. And it's like, this one I could read. It's like, oh yeah, I remember that weird band. I never did check them out, but for $8 used, okay, that's the time I will check things out. And actually not bad. Another one that's in that post-black metal style. They don't have quite the same atmospheric vibe as the first Alcest album that I played. And just to be clear, I know it's not Alcest's first album. It's just the first one in the stack that I picked up. But yeah, this Moonlover album, a lot of online reviews seem to slag it as being just kind of a weaker version of Deaf Heaven. I've never checked out Deaf Heaven, so I don't have any preconceptions about that one, which maybe is a good thing. It may made it a little bit easier to appreciate this one. But yeah, compared to Alcest, the guitars are a little bit cleaner. Just feels, a little bit more, rock metal oriented. The black metal shrieks are really, really well done on this. And the songs just seem to be pretty well written. So glad I picked that one up. Next up, we have, now this is the first album by this band. It's Bellwitch, The Lawning. Been a lot of titles by Profound Lore Records in this collection also. This band, of course, got a lot of press for their most recent album, Mirror Reaper, which I heard parts of it here and there, and it wasn't bad, but it never grabbed my attention enough to make me want to really track it down. I think they had Mirror Reaper in the collection the first time I flipped through it, but it was gone the second time I flipped through it. But I did pick up this one. Funeral Doom band. Interesting that they only use bass and drums. There's no guitar lines on the album at all. It's not bad. I've played it a few times. Like most Funeral Doom, when it gets too slow and minimalist, it does drag quite a bit. But when they're spicing it up just a little bit, when they've got, a few dynamics going on here and there, it's actually quite good. So pretty cool. Probably not something I will play a ton of, but it seems like, yeah, a very solid Funeral Doom band. Somebody in the comments on a recent video, and I'm sorry I don't remember who it was. I'm starting to try to keep better track of these things, but I don't know who left this particular comment. But they had recommended the band Beastmaker to me, and there was a Beastmaker CD in the pile. So like, okay, I don't think that's the one they recommended, but again, I'll check it out. Had no idea what this band sounded like whatsoever, though it was on Rise Above Records, so okay, it's probably something Lee Dorian will like. And yeah, these guys on this album at least are very much going for straight up pentagram clone worship band. It sounds a lot like the 70s and 80s material from Pentagram. So in that sense, I like it. I like that style. I've also found, though, that most other bands can't really capture that sound the way that Pentagram did. So while this is a fairly cool listen, don't know if it'll get a whole lot of spins. There's something about, that early Pentagram material and the classic Death Row era material that's just really so good. And every time a band tries to copy that vibe, something always feels a little bit off. With this band, I feel like maybe it's the lyrics. They aren't horrible at all. They just feel like very sort of paint by numbers, exactly, skull, demon, stuff. So yeah, they're doing a good job following the Pentagram blueprint, but maybe they're following it a little too closely. A couple of these guys also are in Haunt. So Haunt has a million releases. It looks like Beastmaker has done like a ton of EP releases. I don't know how much I'll follow up with the band, really. If I stumble into other things used, I'll probably pick them up. but I don't know if I'll be tracking down a ton of it based on this one. Not a bad album, just not quite interesting enough. I've got something like 30 Pentagram CDs on the wall behind me. I don't need a ton of bands that sound like Pentagram. Okay, next, an old favorite classic, Be Hear It, Drawing Down the Moon. I've got this on vinyl, I've had it for years, but didn't have a CD pressing of it. And sometimes it's just more convenient to pop a CD in rather than have to get the vinyl out and cleaned off and clean the needle and all of that stuff. So, cool album, one of the darkest, creepiest albums that I've ever heard. I love the sound on this one. It's got that, very slow, simple, kind of early Celtic Frost. If you had like a Celtic Frost record that was supposed to be played on 45 RPMs, but you played it on 33 RPMs, you're starting to get the right speed. One review I read of this years ago described it as sounding like a volcano erupting in slow motion, and I always thought that was a very cool image to try to depict the sound with. It's one of the very few albums that, you almost can still get a little bit of that real kind of creeped out vibe from listening to. I played this on Halloween this past year, and it was a really cold, drizzly, gray day, lots of wind and rain pouring and lashing at the windows, and having it be kind of dark from the weather outside and those sound effects in the background, and then this playing, it's kind of like a little bit of a, let's turn on a few more lights and sit here and make sure nothing's sneaking up on me. Cool album. I've always liked it. Another classic, got Dissection's The Somber Lane in this pack. This is another one I've got on vinyl. Just didn't have a CD version of it sitting on the shelf, so didn't mind picking that up. Classic album. Don't really need to talk much about that one. This one, I almost overlooked it because it took me a minute to figure out again what the heck it was. Weird cover picture, and the band name is in really tiny print here at the bottom. But it's a band called Altar of Plagues, if I remember right. They're from Ireland, and they did a couple of interesting albums kind of in the early 2010s. This is their last release, which has a weird title, Teethed Glory and Injury. I'd like to say something got lost in translation, but they're Irish, so I'm not sure how much translating had to be done. A strange title. Anyway, I've heard a couple of the band's other albums. I really like their Mammal release. The one before that, and I forget the title of it, but it has the word white in the title, is also pretty good. I had read reviews of this one, and the reviews were kind of lukewarm, saying that, it doesn't quite live up to the previous ones. But I was still more than willing to pick it up and give it a chance once I figured out what the heck it was. And I'd have to say that, the reviews are right. This one is going for a little bit more of an electronic metal sound. I wouldn't say industrial, but definitely losing a little bit of the ambiance from Mammal and replacing it with some electronic elements, trying out some different things. Still not a bad release at all. It was kind of interesting the band broke up. The main songwriter has moved on to other projects that are not heavy metal at all. Apparently, he didn't even have like a strong metal background, reading some interviews with him. It was just at the time he was writing very dark music. It kind of fit in with what these guys were playing. But now he's in a completely different genre. So, Altar of Plague's kind of a cool band. I wouldn't recommend this particular album. If you're interested in hearing what they sound like, check out the Mammal album instead. Next up, are another artist I've heard a lot about, but have never heard a note of their music. I guess it's pronounced Merkur. This is one of the single person black metal projects, notable for having a female instead of a male doing it. This one got a lot of hype when it came out. It's on Relapse. I've heard the name for several years. I know there was a lot of hype. Some people seem to really enjoy her work. Some people seem to really hate her work. I've never heard any of her work. So for $8, we add it to the stack, and I'll see what I think of it. If I don't like it, it'll go in a VCLT box sometime. And if I do, okay, cool. Next up, we have some Behemoth. And with this one has a terribly convoluted title. I Loved You at Your Darkest. One of these die-cut boxes. I noticed a lot of stuff in the collection had these kind of fancy outer sleeves. I don't know, maybe the person who had bought the collection and put it together originally liked those kind of gimmick sleeves. I'm not sure. It's not the most recent Behemoth album. It's one or two albums back. has kind of cruddy reviews on Metal Archives, but I always take those with a grain of salt. Behemoth overall doesn't seem to get the best reviews on Metal Archives. Um, Behemoth's a band of kind of the jury is still out for me. I've only heard a couple of their albums here and there. There are elements to Behemoth that I like. There are elements that don't always quite get there for me. Pretty good technical death metal stuff. I'm only familiar with the death metal years. I'm not familiar with the earlier black metal years. So musical proficiency, pretty good. I do like that they kind of have their own image and vibe among death metal bands. They, still use the corpse paint, which I have no problem with. It at least gives them a unique aesthetic among death bands. And they also have, a lot of this more intellectual Satanism, mysticism, lots of Aleister Crowley and, his contemporaries. Not something I've ever been into on a personal level, but I can at least appreciate the fact that they're trying to approach those topics from a more philosophical manner rather than just, what was the old, Kelly Bundy joke from Married with Children? Oh, Satan, my Satan, hail Satan, yes, Satan. That stuff, not interesting at all. So Behemoth is at least coming at, sort of, the anti-religion topics from a little, deeper and more philosophical point. So that's kind of interesting. Reading his liner notes, there's a reason he's writing this way, not just for shock value. Nurgle's not just splicing a few words together out of one or two Wikipedia entries. So I appreciate the work they put into it, and the musicianship's pretty tight. Sometimes it's a little on the brutal side for my tastes. So kind of go back and forth on Behemoth a little bit. They are very much the kind of band that, yes, if it's $8 in a used bin, I'll pick it up and give it a chance. I may not keep them all, but I will give them a chance. They are not a band where I'm going to go out and start paying full price. I'm not going to go buy the new album that came out this year for $16.99. I'm not that interested in the band, but I don't mind picking them up for a good price when I get the chance. Let's keep going. We're getting closer to the bottom of the stack. Gotta love some classic Bolt Thrower. Honor, Valor, Pride. I had this on MP3, had never picked up the CD. It's sitting there as part of the collection. As soon as I saw it, it was on the stack. No chance this wasn't coming home with me. Good album. Not one I'm very familiar with out of Bolt Thrower's catalog, but love the opening track. It was it Contact Wait Out. Just builds really good. The opening guitar riff, and then when it comes in and just starts steamrolling, with that double bass and the main riffing. Classic Bolt Thrower sound. What more could you want? Here's one I hadn't heard in a very, very long time. We've got Marduk's Panzer Division Marduk. Like I said, there were some things scattered in by some bigger black metal bands, Dissection, Immortal. Didn't pick up any of the Immortal titles, already had the ones I wanted from this collection. But Panzer Division, I remember when this came out, it was a big deal. Everybody was just blown away by how raw and fast and aggressive it was. I had it via tape trading back in the day, and it was fine. I played it some. Like most Marduk stuff, it kind of got shelved and never really came back off the shelf. But yeah, again, would I track it down? Was I looking for it? No, and no. Would I pay $16.99 to order it brand new? No. Will I pay $8 for a used copy of it? Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I will do that. Haven't replayed that one yet, so don't know. Here's one that is a total blind buy. It's a band called Dead to a Dying World. The album's called Elegy. Never heard of it. Picked it up just because the cover looked interesting. Had my phone out. I was playing clips for lots of things as I flipped through the bins. And so I just, dialed this up on YouTube, listened to it for a few minutes while I was going through more and more of the CDs. It's like, yeah, that actually sounds okay. What the heck? Add it to the stack. Haven't played it yet, so I don't know anything about the band. Don't know what to expect. It's another Profound Lore release, or sometimes their stuff is pretty cool. Sometimes their stuff goes over my head or around my head or just completely bypasses me. But I don't know. Maybe we'll report back on this another time. Also got some Emperor here. I'd been meaning to give some of the Emperor albums another chance. Nightside Eclipse has always been my favorite. The later ones always, hey, I always had some issues with them. I've talked about those on one of the recent heavy metallurgy streams with Marty and Jurgen. But yeah, picked up Anthems to the Welkin at dusk again. It's much better than I remembered it being. I bought it back when it came out upon release. Liked it okay to a point back then, but it didn't stick with me, and I'd long since gotten rid of it. So I'm glad I picked this back up. It is a good album. It's very well done. You'd be hard pressed to claim that it's not a step up in almost every sense of the word from Nightside Eclipse, with one big exception. Yeah, this one does lose a lot of that very evil atmosphere and is replacing it with a little bit more of this, kind of, grand symphonic, bombast vibe instead. And I think I still prefer the evil vibe of the early stuff a little bit. This album can get a bit blasty for blasty's sake if you listen through all the layers of synth. The drums and stuff sometimes are just, pounding away without a ton of direction. It's very hard to pick up on what the strings are doing sometimes at all. So it's a good album. I don't mean to sound like I'm shitting on it. It's a very good album. For me, it's just, not this, benchmark of black metal that a lot of people put it at. It's the kind of album that, again, you look at Metal Archives, this one, it's just 100% scores over and over and over. Never trust anybody who gives something a 100% on Metal Archives. I'm sorry. I don't know if there's any album out there that deserves a 100% score. Usually that's just a sign of someone, that's their pet album and they're going to rant and rave about it all the time. And that's okay. We all have albums we want to do that with. But I never read those reviews because this is not going to be an objective take on the album whatsoever. This is somebody who just loves the album and is looking to gush about it. That's not going to tell me much. Wasn't the only Emperor I picked up. I also got the Prometheus album. And to be honest, I am wondering if I've ever heard this one before. I know I got Nanos Equilibrium when it came out, although I think I only got it by tape trading. I don't think I ever owned a hard copy of that because Anthems, again, I felt like Anthems it got on my nerves because it got more praise than I felt it needed. And so when 9 Equilibrium came out, I think I just had somebody tape that one for me. I never played it very much. I couldn't tell you much about the album. I'm not going to say it's good or bad. I honestly don't remember. And so I'm not even sure, looking at this one in the song titles, I'm not sure I ever checked this one out back in the day. I probably did, and it just made very little impression. And as such, I don't recall anything about it. Haven't spun this one yet. Played Anthems several times. Want to give it a little break, play some of this other stuff. Then we'll check out, the Prometheus album from, am I pronouncing it right? I hope it's Prometheus. Again, these things are not always easy to read as your eyes get older. But yeah, I'll check that one out too. If I remember right, it has a better reputation than 9 Equilibrium. So certainly, again, would not have been trying to track it down, but more than happy to give it a chance here from the used bin. That's it. We got to the bottom of the stack. I spent a lot of money at that store over the past few weeks, but I don't mind doing so. The fellows that run it are pretty nice. They always have a good selection of vinyl and CD stuff. And hey, this kind of stuff doesn't walk in the door every day. It's pretty rare, at least in the places I've lived, that somebody brings in a big collection and drops it off and that you've got something cool to dig through for a few weeks at the store. It's happened a few times around here lately. This year's actually been unusual that we've had a different store had, kind of a classic metal vinyl collection brought in. And we've had this pile of more extreme stuff brought into a different store. So yeah, there's some stuff floating around out there. You just got to check the local stores on a semi-regular basis and hope you show up at the right time. All right, that is going to do it for now. So now let's talk metal in the comments down below. Are you like me and you really don't like ordering records through the mail at this time of year, or does it not bother you in the least? Have you had horror stories of things getting broken or damaged in the mail during the holiday season? Share your pain with your fellow headbangers. Leave a story down below. I've had some really heartbreaking records destroyed during the holiday season, but we'll save those for another time, another conversation. For now, we're going to wrap this on up. So until next time, everybody take care. And as always, keep banging your head and check your local record store. Never know what you find.